Not everyone should hear what you are about to hear. That is the phrase that appears on the first page of King Solomon's Golden Grimoire. And it is the same warning you must carry with you right now, because this is not a common book, nor an ancient story, nor a religious text. It is something much more powerful. A grimoire is a secret book where ancient sages recorded their most sacred knowledge, formulas, laws, codes, mental rituals, and principles that could only be shared with those who were ready to receive them. And King Solomon's Golden Grimoire is considered by many to be the most precious of all because it contains the spiritual, mental, and energetic mechanisms that made Solomon the wisest, most influential, and most prosperous man of his time. But here is something almost no one knows. This grimoire did not speak of demons, nor of dark magic, nor of invocations. It spoke of true power, the power of the human mind connected with divine wisdom. It spoke of spiritual laws that can multiply wealth, expand opportunities, and open paths that seem impossible for those who live only from the material. This golden manuscript taught that prosperity does not come by luck. It comes by alignment, by wisdom, by identity, by internal decisions that govern the external world. And for that reason, this knowledge was not shared with just anyone, because those who are not ready can use power against themselves, and those who are ready simply transform their lives. If you are here, it is because there is a part of you that is already awakened. You now find yourself before the knowledge that for centuries was only accessible to kings, priests, and sages. Knowledge that revealed how a creator thinks, how a king acts, and how wealth is built from a place that very few dare to explore. The very center of your identity. This is not an audiobook. It is a door, an entrance to the oldest and most hidden codes about prosperity, a map for those who wish to stop surviving and begin to govern their reality. So listen carefully, because the Golden Grimoire does not open twice for the same person. And if you have come this far, it is because you are already prepared to hear what was written, to change the destiny of those who dare to receive it. Chapter 1. The Inner Gold, the First Law of the King. They say Solomon was the richest man of his time, but that is not true. What really made him legendary was not the gold he had, but the gold he was. And this is the first teaching of the Golden Grimoire, the teaching that very few understand and that separates those who seek wealth from those who create it. In the Grimoire, Solomon writes that true prosperity does not begin when you receive, but when you become someone capable of sustaining what you receive, because no one can accumulate on the outside what is not built on the inside. That is the first law of the king, the law of inner gold, the law that says your outer wealth is only the visible reflection of your inner wealth. The sages tell that before Solomon ruled over a kingdom, he had to rule over his mind, over his emotions, over his decisions, over his identity. What made Solomon powerful was not the crown. It was the consciousness that sustained the crown. The crown did not make him king. He made the crown a symbol. Think about this. If you place gold in the hands of someone who does not know how to multiply it, they lose it. If you give opportunities to someone who doubts themselves, they sabotage them. And if you give power to someone who has not built themselves from within, they destroy it. That is why Solomon was clear that prosperity is not a gift, it is a consequence. This is where his philosophy becomes revolutionary. Solomon taught that physical gold is not the beginning, it is the result, that abundance begins when you discover the value you are, not what you have. That wealth is born from a wise mind, from a firm identity, from a clean heart, and from decisions made with divine authority. When it is said that God offered Solomon anything and he asked for wisdom, it is not a beautiful story, it is a coded teaching, a key that changes destinies. Because whoever asks for wisdom does not receive a blessing, they receive the key that opens all other blessings. And that is what you are learning now, the real mechanism of the king's prosperity. If today you feel you lack something on the outside, it is because there is something you have not yet built on the inside. Not because you are not enough, but because you are in the exact process that all kings go through before ruling their kingdom. You train first on the inside so as not to lose what you will receive on the outside. Inner gold is clarity, focus, wisdom, identity, and personal power. It is the certainty that you deserve the strength to move forward, the vision to decide, and the peace of knowing that what is for you cannot be lost. And when that lights up inside you, reality has no choice. It reorganizes in your favor. This is the first page of the Golden Grimoire, the beginning of knowledge that transforms the life of whoever is ready. And now that you know the first code, we will advance to the next law, the one that explains why your world always imitates what you are on the inside. Chapter 2. The Mirror of the Kingdom. Everything external is a reflection. In the Golden Grimoire, Solomon wrote that a kingdom never exceeds the consciousness of whoever governs it, and this is one of the deepest laws he left for those who wish to prosper. The world does not speak to you, it reflects you, it shows you in external symbols the exact way in which you are reigning on the inside. And although this idea seems simple, it is one of the most powerful keys to financial and spiritual growth. Because everything you attract, what you lose, what you sustain, and what you build is born first in your identity. The law of the mirror works like this. What you believe you are becomes what you see. What you believe you deserve becomes what you receive. And what you believe possible becomes what happens. That is why Solomon never tried to change the kingdom from the outside. First, he changed the inner king. When something in his environment became misaligned, his first question was not, "What is happening out there?" but "What part of me is creating this?" That is the spiritual authority of someone who understands that reality does not impose itself. It responds, think about this. If internally you see yourself as small, you will seek small jobs, accept small opportunities, make small decisions, and your world will shrink with you. If internally you see yourself as unworthy, you will attract experiences that confirm that unworthiness. If internally you see yourself as limited, you will reject everything that exceeds your limits, not because the universe punishes you, but because identity is the mold where each experience is poured. And just as a mold defines the shape of liquid gold, your identity defines the shape of your destiny. Solomon understood that wealth does not begin when money arrives, but when identity changes. That is why he taught that self-perception is the root of all power, that no one can sustain a level of abundance that does not match their internal image. A beggar who wins a fortune loses it. A king who falls into poverty recovers it, because the external always returns to the internal. This is not motivation, it is a law. Look at this real example. A woman who for years said, "I only need what is fair," began to feel exhausted, limited, and frustrated with her financial life. It was not that opportunities were lacking, it was that her identity was programmed not to receive more. When she worked on seeing herself as someone capable of handling abundance, not out of ambition, but out of expansion, her income multiplied in less than a year. She did not change her environment, she changed her mirror, and the kingdom responded. That is why the Grimoire exercise for this chapter is simple but powerful. It is called the Decree of the Inner King. It consists of choosing each morning an affirmation that does not describe what you see, but what you command. You do not say, "I want prosperity." You say, "I am the source that generates prosperity." You do not say, "I hope something good happens." You say, "My kingdom expands because I am the one who governs my destiny." You do not describe, you decree, you do not ask, you establish. And when the inner king speaks, the kingdom obeys. This is the second law of the Golden Grimoire, understanding that your life is not a mystery, it is a reflection, that what changes inside changes outside, that what you decide to be becomes what you live, and that the world never denies you anything. It only shows you who you are being. Now that you understand this, we are ready to enter one of Solomon's most powerful teachings, the law that explains why doubt destroys wealth and clarity creates it. Chapter 3. The Seal of Irrevocable Decisions. Solomon said that doubt is the most expensive currency of the kingdom, because every time you doubt you pay with opportunities. This teaching is written on one of the oldest pages of the Golden Grimoire, where he explains that the power of a king is not measured by his riches, but by his ability to decide without trembling. For Solomon, a decision was not a thought, it was a spiritual act, an energetic seal that modified reality the instant it was established. The king knew that while a decision remains open, energy disperses, the mind fragments, and life stagnates. That is why he did not allow his mind to inhabit two paths at the same time. When he chose with his entire being. His identity, his energy, his word, and his heart pointed in the same direction, without doubts, without returns, without internal contradiction. That total coherence was what the Grimoire called the royal sentence, a decision that is not negotiated with uncertainty. Here is the key that almost no one understands, and it is one of the reasons why most do not manage to prosper. Doubt cancels the vibration of the decision. If you decide to prosper, but doubt your capacity, doubt cancels the order. If you decide to move forward, but listen to the opinions of others, doubt consumes your energy. If you decide to change course, but keep one foot in the past, doubt sabotages the path. Doubt is not an error, it is a leak, and nothing grows where there are leaks. Solomon understood it before anyone else, and that is why his life advanced with an almost supernatural force. The Bible narrates that his decrees were fulfilled, but the Grimoire explains why. Because he spoke from certainty, not from desire. For Solomon, a decision was not a request, it was an irreversible declaration. He did not wait to see signs to confirm his choice. His choice was the sign. That is the difference between a ruler of their life and someone who only waits for something to happen. A modern example. An entrepreneur who for years doubted expanding his business lived trapped in a cycle of stagnation. He said he wanted to grow, but every time an opportunity appeared, he questioned it, postponed it, or consulted with people who did not share his vision. One day he decided to implement the Grimoire's teaching. He chose a direction, signed contracts, executed actions, stopped asking if it would work. His business grew more in 6 months than in the previous 5 years. The decision had been there all along, only the seal was missing. The exercise of this chapter is called the royal sentence, and it is as simple as it is powerful. It consists of choosing an area of your life where you have been doubting for too long and writing a single irreversible decision. 1, not 10, not 20, 1. Write it as a king, not as a subject, using this formula. I decree that from today, followed by the exact action, and then comes the essential part, sustaining it, not discussing it with your fear, not consulting it with those who do not live your vision, not renegotiating it with your insecurities. Once sealed, reality begins to move. This is the third law of the Golden Grimoire, the law that explains why some people advance rapidly and others remain trapped in the same story for years. Because it is not the universe that blocks, it is indecision that raises the wall. When you decide as a king, the world opens as a kingdom. Now that you understand the seal of irrevocable decisions, it is time to enter a teaching that transforms prosperity itself, the sacred code of fair exchange, where wealth ceases to be a mystery and becomes an act of multiplied value. Chapter 4. The Code of Fair Exchange. In the Golden Grimoire, there is a phrase that is repeated 3 times like a seal, like a secret commandment of the kingdom. The value you give is the value you govern. This line is the basis of one of Solomon's most powerful teachings, the one that explains why his kingdom not only accumulated wealth, but multiplied it continuously, almost automatically, as if abundance were a natural law that responded to his leadership. Solomon knew something many forget. Wealth is not born from effort, it is born from value. Effort without value exhausts. Value without effort prospers, and that is why, while other kings tried to increase their treasures through wars or taxes, Solomon multiplied them through wisdom, strategic decisions, and an unbreakable spiritual principle: fair exchange. For him, creating wealth meant creating value, expanding knowledge, solving problems, illuminating paths, improving the lives of others. Gold simply followed that flow. The alchemy of value is simple, but profound. What you deliver with wisdom returns with abundance. What you deliver with integrity returns multiplied. And what you deliver from your best identity activates doors that do not open with force, but with purpose. This law makes people who contribute clarity, solutions, and vision prosper even when the world is in crisis because value transcends circumstances. That is why, when Solomon speaks of fair exchange, he does not refer to the price of an object, but to the energy you deliver to the world. Observe this. When someone offers mediocre work, they receive mediocre opportunities. When they deliver creativity, they receive expansion. When they deliver leadership, they receive possibilities. When they deliver clarity, they receive prosperity. And when they deliver wisdom, they govern their environment. That is why the law of fair exchange is not moral, it is spiritual mathematics. You multiply what you emit, you govern what you contribute, you attract what you elevate. A current example makes it clear. A young man who had been changing jobs for years without advancing decided to apply this principle. Instead of giving the minimum necessary, he began to give the best he could. He contributed ideas, solutions, leadership, clarity, without expecting immediate recognition. In less than a year, his income tripled, not because he worked more, but because he became more valuable. Fair exchange does not reward sacrifice, it rewards increase. The exercise of this chapter is the value pact. It consists of identifying an area of your life where you are delivering less than you can, where you are giving from obligation, not from value, and deciding to elevate your contribution, not to impress anyone, but to increase your internal authority. When you contribute real value, your mind changes, your identity changes, and the energy of the universe responds. The pact is this: from today, what I deliver carries my signature, my quality, my power. This is the fourth law of the Golden Grimoire, the law that explains why some prosper without apparent effort and why others sacrifice themselves without obtaining results. The universe does not move by exhaustion, it moves by value. And when you begin to multiply what you deliver, gold becomes an inevitable consequence. Now we are ready to enter a teaching that very few know. The reason why Solomon guarded his energy with such zeal, because it does not matter how much value you generate, if you allow leaks, wealth will not grow. Chapter 5. The Secret Right of Energetic Protection of the King. In the Golden Grimoire, there is a symbol engraved in the margin of several pages, a perfect circle surrounded by 7 points. That symbol represented the king's shield, the reminder that no wealth can be sustained if the ruler's energy bleeds in wrong silences, in incorrect companions, or in habits that weaken the spirit. Solomon knew that energy is the first treasure, and that everything else, gold, influence, clarity, vision, depends on protecting it as if it were an invisible crown. The Grimoire explains that each person you speak with, each conversation you allow, each thought you feed, each criticism you hear, and each distraction you accept affects your ability to manifest, not by superstition, but because energy is the raw material of all creation. Where energy drains, prosperity stops. And that is why Solomon was extremely selective, not with arrogance, but with wisdom. He did not allow just anyone to have access to his attention, because attention is the link that unites your spirit with the world. The thieves of wisdom, as the manuscript calls them, are not bad people. They are misaligned people who repeat complaints, who live in scarcity, who speak from fear, who criticize without building, who demand without contributing. And every time you allow their voice to enter your field, your energy recalibrates to their frequency. You do not need to fight. You do not need to judge. You only need to understand that your prosperity depends on surrounding yourself with people who add, not who contract your world. Solomon spent hours in silence before making important decisions, not to think more, but to cleanse his energy, to listen to himself, to reconnect with the divine wisdom that guided him. The Grimoire teaches that solitude was not a punishment, but a ritual. The ritual where the king returned to his center, where he withdrew the noises of the kingdom to find the voice of his spirit. And he understood something essential. If the king's energy breaks, the entire kingdom fractures. Look at this modern example. A brilliant person with talent for multiplying businesses began to stagnate for no apparent reason. Each project was delayed, each collaboration failed, each opportunity dissolved. When he evaluated his environment, he realized he was surrounded by people who doubted, who criticized everything, who thought from lack. And by lovingly cutting them off, his expansion returned. It was not luck, it was energetic protection. The exercise of this chapter is called the Golden Shield. It consists of choosing 3 things that constantly drain your energy: a person, a habit, and a thought, and for 7 days you remove them from your life. You do not need explanations. You do not need dramatic endings. You only need to protect your energy, as a king would who knows that his wealth depends on his clarity. When you protect your energy, your prosperity accelerates effortlessly because your spirit recovers its natural power. This is the 5th law of the Golden Grimoire, the law that says wealth does not grow where there are leaks, that your energy is your royalty, and that you cannot govern an external kingdom if you do not govern the internal space where your power lives. Now, we will advance to an even deeper teaching, the law that explains why Solomon considered the invisible as the true origin of gold and how you can activate that treasure within you. Chapter 6. The Geometry of the Invisible Treasure. In the Golden Grimoire, Solomon left written that the invisible is more solid than gold, a phrase that baffles those who live only from the material, but that reveals the very heart of spiritual wealth. For him, the visible was merely the shadow and the invisible the structure. Physical gold could multiply or be lost, but invisible gold, ideas, visions, decisions, spiritual patterns, was indestructible, and that is why he called it treasure, because there everything that would later become form was born. Solomon observed reality as an architect of 2 worlds, the internal world and the external world. In the Grimoire, he describes that each fortune, each construction, each alliance, and each expansion of the kingdom had a previous geometry, an energetic structure, an invisible design that preceded creation. For the king to think was not to imagine, it was to diagram destiny. He did not see his thoughts as clouds, but as architectural plans that life was obliged to manifest when sustained with clarity. The manuscript teaches that there are archetypes, symbols, and patterns that organize wealth, that before an opportunity arrives, there exists an idea that summons it. Before a door opens, there exists an identity that activates it. Before money flows, there exists a decision that calls it. And before a dream materializes, there exists an internal order that allows it. Nothing arrives by chance. Everything responds to an invisible geometry that you yourself draw without realizing it. Think about this. When someone lives from lack, their internal geometry is narrow, fragile, incomplete, and life reflects that form. Limitations, scarcity, small opportunities. When someone lives from expansion, their internal geometry is wide, luminous, firm, and life reflects that amplitude. This is not metaphorical. It is structural. Just as a building cannot sustain 10 floors if it was designed for 2, a life cannot sustain abundance if its internal structure is designed to survive. A modern example demonstrates it with clarity. A man who wanted to start a business. He had been stuck in mediocre jobs for years. He believed his problem was lack of opportunities, but his internal geometry was designed not to risk, not to lose, not to fail. When he worked on strengthening that invisible structure, allowing himself to think big, imagine big, decide big, his life began to show opportunities he had never seen. It was not magic, it was geometry. His internal design changed and the world reorganized around that design. The exercise of this chapter is called the Diagram of Inner Gold. It consists of writing your vision of prosperity not as desire, but as structure. Defining who you must be to sustain what you ask for, how your life should feel, how your decisions should be, how your identity should expand. You do not describe the external, you define the internal. You are creating the blueprint of your kingdom. And when that blueprint is clear, reality cannot ignore it. It must adjust. This is the 6th law of the Golden Grimoire, the law that explains why wealth does not appear from outside to inside, but from inside to outside. Why visible gold is merely the consequence of invisible gold, and why your life will change when you redesign the geometry of your spirit. Now we will advance to one of the king's most powerful teachings, the law that reveals why wealth grows faster in silence and why your plans must be protected until they are unbreakable. Chapter 7. The Law of Silent Construction. In the Golden Grimoire, Solomon left a warning written with darker ink than in any other chapter. What you reveal before time weakens. What you build in silence strengthens. For the king, silence was not absence. It was protection. It was strategy. It was a shield that prevented external forces, opinions, doubts of others, envy, interference, misaligned energy from fracturing the delicate form of what was still being made. The king understood a truth that very few know. Every project, dream, plan, or idea has a sacred stage, a vulnerable stage, a stage where any noise can alter its growth. And this is the reason why many people never manage to consolidate their goals. They expose them too soon. They show them before they have roots. They deliver them to the judgment of the world when they are not yet strong enough to resist. Solomon's silence was not mystery. It was wisdom. The law of silent construction says that everything you share, before being completely consolidated, activates external energies that interfere with your internal process. And it is not about dark magic. It is about spiritual psychology. When you speak too soon, you begin to receive opinions you did not ask for, doubts that are not yours, fears that do not belong to you, expectations of others that take you away from your intuition. In the end, what was a pure vision becomes contaminated, and what was a firm plan begins to crack. That is why Solomon protected his projects as if they were invisible treasures, not out of distrust, but because he knew that power grows in silence and expresses itself greatly. The Grimoire describes that many of his most important decisions, alliances, constructions, decrees, agreements, were gestated in absolute silence, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, until they were completely sealed within him. Only then did he reveal them, not before. Look at this modern example. A woman who for years tried to start a business, but every time she had a new idea, she told her family, her friends, co-workers, and each external opinion became a brick that weighed more than her vision. When she decided to apply this law, she stopped sharing her plans, worked on them alone, strengthened them in silence, and for the first time in her life managed to materialize one, not because she changed her mind, but because she stopped exposing it when it was too fragile. Silence was her armor. The exercise of this chapter is called the Vow of the King's Silence. It consists of choosing a project, a desire or a transformation you want to manifest, and committing not to speak about it with anyone for 40 days, to work on that vision in deep intimacy, to strengthen it with silent action, to nourish it without exposure. What you build in silence becomes unbreakable, because no one can destroy what no one knows. This is the 7th law of the Golden Grimoire, the law that explains why your dreams must be born in the internal sanctuary before being shown to the world, why energy disperses when you speak too soon, and why wealth grows faster when no one is watching. Now you are ready for the next teaching of the Grimoire, the most advanced in terms of prosperity, the law that explains how to multiply what you already have and how to transform a single opportunity into a complete kingdom. Chapter 8. The Solomonic Art of Multiplying. On one of the most guarded pages of the Golden Grimoire appears a word written 3 times surrounded by a circle of symbols. Multiply, multiply, multiply. The scribe said that this phrase was the heart of Solomon's economic power, because attracting wealth can be done by anyone, but multiplying it is an art reserved for those who master the invisible laws of the spirit. And here, the manuscript reveals something extraordinary. For Solomon, to multiply was not a financial technique. It was an expansion of the soul. The Grimoire explains that everything touched by an expanding consciousness multiplies. Ideas, opportunities, resources, relationships, visions, because the similar attracts the similar. But when a consciousness contracts fear, scarcity, or doubt, even the great is reduced. That is why the key to Solomonic prosperity was not the gold that entered, but the energy of the king who received it. When energy is in expansion, any seed becomes forest. When it is in contraction, any forest becomes seed. Solomon understood that an opportunity is not a gift of destiny, it is an instrument. And the size of the instrument does not determine the result, it is determined by the mind that uses it. That is why, when he received something small, he did not say, "This is not enough." He said, "This is the beginning of something greater." That internal change, that recognition of potential, activated the law of spiritual multiplication. What is honored grows, what is appreciated expands, what is used with wisdom flourishes. The key is in this phrase from the Grimoire. He who sees little receives little. He who sees treasure in the small governs over the great. This is the difference between those who transform their lives and those who wait for a stroke of luck. The king did not wait to have more to begin. He began to have more. He did not ask for signs. He became a sign. He did not look for opportunities. He found ways to multiply the ones he already had. A modern example demonstrates it. A man who wanted to change his economic life complained constantly about not having enough to begin. When he applied this law, he stopped looking at what he did not have and began to multiply what he did have. He improved his skills, organized his finances, sold objects he did not use, created a service from his knowledge, offered value where no one offered it. In less than a year, his income tripled, not because a miracle appeared, but because he activated the law of multiplication. For Solomon, multiplication was not linear growth, it was exponential growth. It was not about advancing one by one, but about converting one into 10. The difference is mental, not mathematical. In his writings, he explains that whoever thinks multiplication makes decisions that elevate, whoever thinks survival makes decisions that maintain, and whoever makes decisions from fear makes decisions that reduce. To multiply is to think like a king, to sustain like a king, to decide like a king. The exercise of this chapter is called the multiplying blessing and consists of choosing a single thing you already possess, a skill, an idea, a resource, a small opportunity, and committing to multiply it in 7 days. Not to wait, not to analyze, to multiply. If it is knowledge, teach it. If it is an opportunity, expand it. If it is a small income, invest it. If it is a skill, use it. The multiplying action activates doors that were dormant. Nothing multiplies at rest. Everything multiplies in movement. This is the 9th law of the Golden Grimoire, the law that transforms enough into abundant, the ordinary into extraordinary, the small into great, the law that distinguishes kings from survivors. Because kings do not wait for more, they multiply what they have until it becomes more. And now that you know the Solomonic art of multiplying, you are ready to enter the final chapter, the Golden Pact, the commitment that converts all this knowledge into an irreversible path toward spiritual and material prosperity. Chapter 9. The Golden Pact. They say every grimoire has an ending, but this one does not end, it activates. King Solomon's Golden Grimoire was not written to be read, it was written to be embodied. And now that you have received its 9 laws, you arrive at the most important point of all, the pact. The manuscript says that prosperity is not a destination, it is an agreement, a pact between your spirit and your purpose, between your light and your path, between your consciousness and your creation. And that pact begins here. The Golden Pact does not ask for perfection, it asks for commitment. It does not require you to be a king immediately, it only requires that you never again live as a subject of your fears. The Golden Pact is the decision to govern your internal world, to honor your energy, to protect your vision, to multiply your value, to act from your throne, not to doubt when life asks for your greatness. This pact is the final seal that converts knowledge into destiny, intention into path, and spirit into prosperity. From today, every thought you have will be seed, every decision, decree, every silence, protection, every act, multiplication, and every dream, a blueprint of the kingdom you are building. From today, you no longer walk in darkness, you walk with a grimoire open. In your spirit, you walk with the wisdom of the king who discovered how to convert the invisible into gold. You walk with the power of someone who understood that wealth is identity, expansion, purpose, decision, and connection with the divine. And now, listen to this carefully. because this is the final phrase written on the last page of the manuscript. He who receives this knowledge never becomes the same again, and whoever decides to use it opens a destiny that cannot be closed. That destiny is now yours. It is open, it is alive, it is waiting for your next step. If this wisdom spoke to you, if it awakened something in you, I invite you to continue this path. The Golden Grimoire is not the end, it is the portal. And on this channel you will find other books that amplify what you began today. The Law of the Echo, the mental map of wealth, the frequency of the chosen ones, the secret that Neville could not say, the 7 no's of living energy, the Creator's Code, and so many others that have transformed thousands of lives. Listen to them with the same spirit with which a king opens a treasure, because each audiobook is a key, each teaching is a code, each word is a spark that expands your greatness, and what comes now will be even more powerful, more revealing, deeper. Because this channel does not bring common messages, it brings knowledge that changes destinies. The Golden Pact is made. Your kingdom has already begun, and what comes will be great. I await you in the next audiobook. If this teaching resonated with you and you want to continue unlocking the ancient wisdom that transforms lives, subscribe to this channel now. Click that subscribe button and activate notifications so you don't miss the next powerful teachings that await you. Your journey to prosperity has only just begun, and the best is yet to come. Subscribe now and join thousands who are already walking the path of the kings.